Hello and welcome once again to White Lotus of Light conversational series. And I'm joined once again by the illustrious Tom Siebert. Tom, remind me again, what's the name of your website? Of course, I'll have it below so people can check out your writing. Tom is a film critic, and he likes to, on occasion, do decodes of these kind of like heavily occulted films. And he did one recently to where I thought his writing, which is always really good, was superb, and just really intriguing about this recent film from the Obamas at Netflix. They were the executive producers. Is it Leave the World Behind? Is that right?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Leave the World Behind. And I actually haven't seen it. Just seeing stills of that movie as someone who's very energetically sensitive actually really, it just wasn't a vibration that I wanted to do right now with some of the work I'm doing. And so Tom took a bullet for me and then put it through his filter and and did some research and just came up with some incredible information. And so Tom, how are you doing this evening, man?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Yes.
Fantastic.
I'm not a nighttime guy, but I'm going to give it my best shot.
Oh, well, sorry about that. I forced Tom to stay up. I've been so busy recently that I just haven't really even been able to do my own show. And I wanted to have Tom on because this is such a hot topic. It just dropped Monday, is that right? Or earlier?
I think last Friday. I think this Friday will be 1 week.
Sounds right.
I think, but thereabouts.
Well, it's going to be pretty fresh. It'll be like 8 days old when this is going to probably go up. I'll try and get it up either here tonight, Thursday, or we'll get it up Friday. Because I want people to see this because a lot of people are talking about this, and I think Tom has a very keen eye for this sort of de-occulting, and I'm going to offer my kind of perspective at the end. But before we launch into that, I am going to talk about something that I talk about a lot in this channel, which is this frame that I use for this conflict between the groups that are called sorry, I just had important text there and realized my phone was still on. My apologies. I thought that this film was very important because, in part, there's aspects of it, the little I know about it, that really play into this model of this Luciferian versus Molochian, meaning there isn't one unified elite, but rather that there are competing groups of elites. And fortunately for us, because of certain astrological cycles, or what the Hindus refer to as the Yuga system, this system we've been under for the past 6,000 years, which I describe as basically Babylonian dark sorcery, that's from this group that I call the Molochians. And I'm going to show real quick this chart that kind of explains it. And so, viewers, if you've been on this channel a lot, you're familiar with this, and you can just kind of fast forward through this. I'm not going to belabor this a lot, but basically, you can look at this chart as independent deities: Moloch, Lucifer, and the Most High being who Jesus came to preach about, Jesus Yeshua, and a number of other prophets and saints and sages over the millennia. But the past 6,000 years, the Kali Yuga has been ruled by this Molochian force named after Haman Baal, which will be relevant later in the show. AKA Moloch was the name that the Jews and King David gave to the god of their enemy, the Canaanites, who were to the north in Tyre in particular. And that group is who I believe, and I go into this a lot on this channel, came to rule the planet, the sort of Molochian consciousness, the dark sorcerers of Moloch out of Babylon. So they have a number of things about them that is very distinct. That, for example, hive mind, they tend to push dead materialism because if you only live once, then it makes you very easy to bribe and or threaten with death. They like slavery. In fact, key to their god being able to influence the world, they have to do the Epstein-style harm of children in a very ritualistic, magical rite, as a matter of fact. So that is key to them, and it's something that the Luciferians and most high level of consciousness people absolutely abhor. It's something that we have in common. They also believe in might makes right, material stagnation for humanity. But what confuses a lot of people is this next group, the Luciferians. They have a lot of crossover with the Molochians. They have conquest, hierarchy, competition. They're ruthless. They're absolutely ruthless. And they have a desire for power. But instead of having a core trait of self-hatred, they have a core trait of narcissism. So they believe in enlightened self-interest, rule of law over man, meritocracy, and the honoring of contracts. They're agreement capable. The Molochians are not agreement capable. They might make an agreement if it's to their benefit, but they'll break it the second that it goes against them. Might makes right, or they'll just act unilaterally above the law. And you see this with like the Clintons and the Bushes, just blatantly, or the Obamas, blatantly acting above the law. And so the core trait of Luciferians being narcissism, they do have actually some positive things, which is they believe in cooperation, they believe in advancements in arts and sciences, all this because it helps them. They believe in liberty and free will because they want to have free will. They believe in the spiritualization of humanity because there is something about this force that's evolutionary that pushes people in a spiritual direction, and the improved material well-being of humanity. And those traits crossover with the Most High, which is the very, very high vibration. And you'll notice at the absolute opposite of Epstein's style harm of children, you have innocence is protected. The core trait is self-love, as in love thy neighbor as thyself, the core teaching of Yeshua. And so, this is a very high level to maintain in terms of consciousness, but it's something that I aspire to. And I think most of the good people of the planet really aspire to this, even if, sometimes we're probably somewhere in here because this is just kind of the state of consciousness of the planet. That doesn't mean that we agree with Luciferianism in the sense of the religious sense, but this is more in the states of consciousness. Although there are deities and there are religions around, obviously all three of those, this one being very well known, but the Luciferians are very different from the Molochians, who are basically the same as the Satanists. And a very prominent family within that Molochian group here in the United States, although they are mere frontmen and they're several Russian nesting dolls away from the actual course of power, is the Obamas. Nonetheless, they're phenomenally powerful as far as overt actors in this country. And Tom, with that, laying that groundwork, can you show how the satanic themes in this film, because it's, Moloch to me is the enemy of David and the Jews, and therefore is clearly what Satan, the adversary, is referring to me. And I just think it's a very useful term because of it also is associated with the Epstein style harm of children. And you always see that in these mind control programs like MK Ultra and all the Project Marionette that the Nazis have, where they tortured. That's very common. That's a very common method of torture, sexual torture as well. And it's because it's related to this energy, and it's a signature of that deity. And so hence Epstein and all the blackmail. And one of the central families of this energy, the Obama family. So take it away.
Well, I think we should start at least giving a quick synopsis of the film in case people have not seen it before we get into some stills from it. And just in short, it's basically, it begins with a family in Brooklyn, New York that wants to get away for a holiday weekend and gets an Airbnb up on Long Island on the beach in a very rural area. And while they're there, things start to go wrong. The power goes out, the internet goes out, and late at night, a black man and a much younger black woman come to the door, and it turns out that this is the guy who owns the house and his daughter. And there's a blackout in New York too, and they didn't feel safe there, and they want to go back to their house. And tension sets in because the black daughter wants them to get their house back, have their master bedroom and all that sort of stuff. And the white mother of the family that's there doesn't. And the black family ends up sleeping in their own basement. And things just get worse and worse from there. And I won't go too far into it. We'll go through these stills and then we'll start to explain things.
There's heavy racial tension themes throughout.
There is.
And stuff to push divisiveness.
Right. And beyond that, it was both the women in this are insufferable bitches. They really are just dislikable. And the men at first are both far more reasonable, but as it goes on, the white father is revealed to be a coward and a wimp, and really the black dad, he does nothing wrong in the whole thing. That guy's flawless. So take that as you will.
Mm-hmm.
So You want to share the screen with this with our stills for now? Or is there anything else I should say before we get into this?
Well, just that it basically has apocalyptic themes,
Oh
and
yeah.
the kind of core message of the movie, which will be further elucidated by these stills, is just divisiveness, especially along racial lines in an event of a crisis of some sort.
Yes.
It's not defined, right? They don't say an EMP. I've heard people speculate there was an EMP blast, but it's not clear what the crisis is.
No, everything remains unclear. With there are various options put up. Maybe it was bombs, maybe it was an EMP, maybe it was something else entirely, maybe it was China, maybe it was North Korea. You know, there are various theories. The one thing I will say, and yes, the film is very, very racially divisive throughout. But at the very, very end, because the daughter is constantly telling her dad, don't trust these people. They're white people. Don't trust them. Don't trust them. The last scene of the film is where the black dad decides to trust the white father, and tells him what's really going on and tells him, like maybe what we can do to get to a bunker. So like finally at the end, when everything is going wrong and the guy's got to make a choice, he does choose to trust him. But this is a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, and 2 hours and 10 minutes of it are extraordinarily divisive. So anyway, but I mean, that's just like, I mean, again, the tip of the iceberg of the stuff that's like snuck into this film. I mean, it's truly astonishing. I mean, the attention to detail in this movie is nefarious. I mean, it's like people put a lot of effort into making this film as
sinister,
symbolically evil as possible. Symbolically evil as possible. So, all right, we want to go with this?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. All right. We got it? We on?
Yes.
All right. This is literally the opening scene of the movie. Ethan Hawke is the dad. He wakes up in bed, and if you look across, we got 76, and there's a 6. 6:30 in the morning, it's a 6, and it's 6:30 over here too. We don't even see that. It's just a 6. We got a nice big crack coming down the wall because things are about to fall apart. And, I mean, again, this is so blatant, it's ridiculous. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
And now, meanwhile, who he's talking to his wife. This is Julie Roberts. She is an advertising executive. And before this, we get a minute of beauty where she's looking out at the sunrise and she's seeing all the people going to work and getting their days together. And she gives this idealistic speech about every day is a new thing. And then she ends it with, but then I remember, I fucking hate people. And she like turns to look in the camera to say that. She's like, yes, and then I remember, I fucking hate people. I mean, really, it's like, again, how blatant
dead her eyes are. It's creepy.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. I mean, there's that. Then we get the credits, and we'll point out, look, we got red, we got white, we got black, or scarlet, silver, and black, if you like. Let's remember to get back to this guy, too, by the way, Sam Ismail, but we'll talk about him later. Then, of course, here we have our ex-president and our first lady. They're the executive producers of this film. And there's been reporting that said that like Barack Obama literally changed things inside the film. He said, that's not realistic. This should happen, et cetera, and so forth. And if you want to look up the stories, you can find them. It's not hard. All right, now here's the kicker. We got all the credits are in red, white, and black. And there you have it. The official 3 colors of Satanism are red, white, and black. You've got the satanic flag, but you can do a bunch of searches, and actually what they really call it are silver, scarlet, and black. But red, white, and black for our purposes here, and for, I guess, their flag. And then here, like, it was the promo. I didn't find this. I found, other people found it. I just happened to find somebody noticed it before I did. I mean, like, right there, boom. There are any number of ways they could have designed that, and they designed it to look just like that.
Yeah, and remember, Hammon Baal, that is the name of the Phoenicians in Tyre and Carthage for their god that the Jews referred to as Moloch, the Greeks called Kronos. Yeah, and so that's like super blatant, and that's why I say that's the true name of Satan. It's not Lucifer. It's very, very different.
Yeah, I would agree entirely on that. So, all right. The first thing that goes wrong is a giant oil tanker goes out of control and grounds itself on the beach where the White family is staying. And we should look at this, that the boat, the ship is called the White Lion. And it just so happens that the White Lion is also the name of the first slave ship to bring Africans to well, at the time, it was still an English colony in 1619. The English colony of Virginia, the first Black Africans brought for slaves arrived on a ship called the White Lion. And then after they leave the beach, they're rushing home. They want to get off, and and their exit is in Point Comfort. And how interesting. Okay, so we've got Point Comfort, and then later when they're trying to listen to radio, they're starting to get the news. It's radio station 1619 that they get. All right, now, as we find out, the 1619, the first Africans to be brought to America for slavery, came in at Point Comfort, Virginia, on the ship, the White Lion, in 1619. So 1619 actually pops up multiple times throughout the film. This is just one of several, I think 3. And you got Point Comfort, and you got the White Lion. Boom, 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 boom. So that's no coincidence. But somebody else, a Jesus person online, happened to point out that Revelation 16:19 refers to the fall of Babylon and God's wrath, punishing Babylon, forcing the people of Babylon to drink of God's wrath. So, all right. This is out of sync. Actually, this is the last scene that we see the 2 men in the movie. The movie does continue past this. But at this point, they've just had their, I wouldn't even call it a confrontation. The Black dad, like, literally just says, look, can I trust you? Like, he feels very alone, and they do bond. But then it goes to this shot, and I just thought it was very odd with numbers playing so much, and this is about an apocalypse. You got a 12 and a 22. I don't know if that's coincidence or not, but I thought I'd at least toss it out there. This is the basement to, oh, I haven't even told you, have you? Sorry, my mistake. What happens is the people who own the house where these people are staying come back from Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Have I already said this part?
Yeah, you just said that things started to unravel and there was tension around it, and that the people had.
Oh, yes, thank you. All right, good. So, all right,
but
like I said,
yeah.
late at night, my problem. All right, so the racial tension ends up with the agreeable Black father going with his daughter to sleep in the basement. And that's where they spend the majority of their time in the evenings. In the daytime, everybody filters. But the white couple who were there renting the B&B, they get the luxurious master bedroom. And the Black family, they go to the basement.
Yeah. Can you go back to that? I want to point out.
Sure. Oh, please.
First of all, there's the red, white, and black picture. But then equally interesting to me is that if you look, that those aren't just X's. I don't think those are X's. What I would describe that as hourglasses. And hourglass is one of the symbols, along with the scythe, of Kronos, because Kronos is also the god of time, in addition to being the god of death. And the lower aspect of Saturn, aka Kronos, is Moloch.
All right. Good catch. All right. I was going to go with something more like double cross. Somebody's going to get double crossed, but I like yours better.
Yeah. Well,
there aren't too many characters in this movie, but one that the white dad runs into when he's trying to get to town but gets lost because his GPS is out, because the internet and the satellites are out, is a Hispanic woman who appears to be a maid on the side of the road begging for help. And he talks to her and then decides to abandon her. And, you know, for a film that's pretty full of divisiveness, I was kind of put off by like this woman who's Hispanic begging for help, and then the white guy is just like, yeah, can't, you know, he feels guilty, but, you know, he rolls up the window in her face and drives away. And it just seemed like another really ugly, you know, ugly scene.
Yeah, race baiting.
Yeah, and then this kind of caught my attention too. Like the daughter is walking from one room to the other. We've got like the light obelisk here. If you know your supernatural obelisk stuff, that's interesting. And then she goes to the other side, and like the whole room darkens, and now the obelisk is dark. And I don't know what it means. It just like struck me as very strange because I don't know, just struck me as weird.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if this needs much of an explanation. I mean, um, to overt messages on people's shirts. I don't know how many people know that the obey symbol was designed by the same person who later designed the Obama Hope poster during his campaign. They're made by the same person. And then, there are gazillion mysteries around NASA. Um, who knows? But that seemed weird. Um, I included this just because I don't know what it means, but for a film that pays so much attention to its mise en scène and design and all that, it was just a very weird shot to me where the father and the daughter are talking after the white family has left because they want to get back to New York, but of course they can't. They have to return. But at this point, they've left. And like, I don't know why they're not centered. They're not, at least, full body shots on one of the sides. I don't know. Maybe it's just trying to show how off kilter everything is. I don't know, but it just struck me as weird. Um, Now, this one caught my attention because whenever I see something like this, it's like, oh, what books do they bring to prominence? What books do they try to bring to prominence? And the only book here that you can actually read the title of is called Off the Cliff, which is basically what happens in this movie. America goes off the cliff.
Mm.
Um, and then when we were talking before, you had mentioned, yeah, we got the eagle down in the bottom, like the eagle has fallen or the eagle is looking away from us. He almost has his back to us. I
Yeah.
don't know. But that was Ian's observation. I think it's good to know. This should have been at the end, but I put it in here. As usual, the critics love it. The public doesn't. I mean, 2,500 ratings. That's a pretty valid score. All right. Now, when the white family tries to escape and get back to, well, first they want to go to Manhattan, then they decide they're going to go to New Jersey. They can't because what's happening is all the Teslas in the area are getting called out on their auto drives. All these Teslas are vacant and they're just causing massive gridlock everywhere. The Teslas here are like, at one point, the camera pulls up and away and you see goes on like 100 cars. And they're all accidents, and it almost kills the family. You can't see, but from where she is back here, behind her is her husband and her kids in the car, and then Teslas start coming at them. Boom, boom. They almost kill her. She gets in the car and drives it away and avoids like 5 or 6 Teslas, and they all just start smashing into them one after another. And then the camera pulls way back all the way up to overlooking the bridges into Manhattan and everything is gridlocked. There are just car accidents everywhere. So with the presumption being these driverless Teslas are, causing these horrible accidents. So, all right, I didn't know. Okay, maybe we get back. This is weird. This is where they ultimately flee to, behind a red door at the Thorns. I mean, Thorn was the name of the Antichrist in the Omen movies. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of weird. And
That
it's
same
red.
red, white, and black, pretty close to it.
Oh yeah, right. Again, red, white, and black again.
Yeah.
And then the youngest daughter, who was wearing the NASA shirt, she gets to this Thorn's house because they've been told that they have a emergency bunker in the home. And the daughter, you can see she breaks the window, she goes in, and then she walks her way to the bunker down this blood red hallway once again. And yeah, while she's going there, these two who have been at each other's throats the whole movie, the white mom and the black daughter, they finally bond over the fact that New York is getting nuked and everybody's going to die. So that's what brings them together. And then I just pulled this because, again, I saw this on the White Lion ship. That seems strange. I don't know what that symbol stood for. You said it looks a little bit like the Saturn symbol, I think. That was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just part of it. It's just the lower part of there would be a cross basically at the top of that would then make the glyph of Saturn. So it looks like it could be an occulted glyph of Saturn, which would make sense if it's also on the lower part of the thing that it's the lower aspect of Saturn is Kronos, aka Moloch. So I mean
Right.
that might be a bit of a reach, but
Okay. I
there's
mean, again,
enough
maybe.
other things in it, like I have thoughts about the obelisks and some of the other stuff, but
Right.
let's.
Well, all right. Well, let's go back. We'll finish the movie. The movie basically, the last scene of the movie is um, every major player gets a point. We've already seen the white dad and the black dad finally agree to trust each other in the car. The white mom and the black daughter like end up comforting each other as New York is nuked, and the daughter ends up in the bunker in the Thorns home, where she finds an emergency entertainment system that allows her to see the last episode of Friends. And throughout the entire film, she's been complaining about the fact that she's been binge watching Friends for months, and now it's time to watch the last episode, and the place has no power. So the film ends basically with her abandoning her family in the basement bunker of the Thorns home, watching the final episode of Friends. And the film ends as the opening theme of Friends begins, "I'll be there for you," which is like the sickest joke ever, because nobody is there for anybody in this movie. The government is not there for you. Nobody's looking out for you. She's abandoned her family to watch television. And it's just like the sickest, most cynical joke to end this sick, cynical movie. So, and then, I tag these things on at the end just like to show, I can't believe that people are doing memes about this film referring to revelation of the method. I mean, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, if you had mentioned revelation of the method to people, I mean, they would have no idea what you're talking about. Now you've got people battling it out with the memes to try to warn or advise people. And then, here's another one. And I could have gotten 20 more. There's like 20 memes about this movie, all about, how it's loaded with symbology and sinister messaging, et cetera, and so forth.
And,
So,
and NASA has a pretty well-known occulted Saturn there
oh
in
yeah.
the middle of it. So obey Saturn is what I think is actually being
Oh,
there, right?
okay.
People look at NASA and everybody loves that. And I mean, NASA's super interesting, but I mean, my other thought on that is that if indeed they do pull the trigger on the whole faked ET invasion, maybe this is forecasting that NASA would be given some kind of like greater sway in the government, perhaps even incredible amounts of power in this, because NASA is kind of like the old thing, the Molochian system, right? Although it certainly was chock full of Luciferians from its outset, but Space Force to me seems much more Luciferian energetically and from a operational standpoint, what it does. So it's interesting to me that I see this as saying obey, and you notice again it's red, white, and black. Obey.
Yeah. Yes.
Saturn on the other side, occulted Saturn in the middle of NASA. And people have theories on that NASA means something in gematria and all this kind of stuff. Would you show the obelisk thing? Because I want to
Yes.
something about the obelisks. And did you feel complete, Tom? I didn't want to cut off your time here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at my notes. There are a couple things I think I could add just, while we're talking about the film.
Sure.
Uh, I think, and we didn't even mention this when we were talking beforehand, but it's key. There are a couple key moments in the film. The one I did mention to you, at one point, the black dad confides in the mom while they're both drinking, the white mom, that he has a very rich client, his richest client, who's tied to the military-industrial complex. And the day before the lights go out and the powers go off, this military-industrial complex guy calls the financier, the homeowner, and wants him to move all this money around. And the financier, who has joked before that this guy is the member of a evil cabal who rules the world. He says, "Oh, is something up with the evil cabal?" And this guy doesn't laugh. He doesn't say anything. He's just like, "Good luck," click, boom, and they hang it up. And the black dad is like, it seemed significant to me. That's why I wanted to get out of New York. And then later, the white daughter tells the story, and I think we've all heard this joke before, about the super religious guy who lives in the flood zone and prays to God to be safe. And the guy comes along in the canoe, and the guy's like, no, no, God's going to save me. And they send a helicopter. He's like, no, no, God's going to save me. Then he drowns. He gets to heaven, and God's like, I sent you the canoe and the helicopter. What's wrong with you? You know, your prayers were answered. You just didn't see the signs. And so that's, the kind of what the movie is trying to tell you, like, see these signs, see these signs. Well, this movie is loaded with signs. This movie is loaded with signs.
Yeah.
So,
Also, in the background, I'm noticing the thing to the right of the clock looks a bit like there's kind of a symbol of like a hand with an eye in it, and I'm blanking on the name of that symbol, but there's like
Horus.
And there's good and there's also dark versions of that symbol, right? It's a bit like the thing to ward away the evil eye, but certain representations of it kind of are the evil eye. So that's interesting, just that symbol over there. But what I was going to say about the well, wait, first of all, do you feel complete? And then I can
let's talk there. I've got a couple of things in my notes, but why don't we hit this while we're on it? Let's hit it while we're on it.
Great. So just in the story of Osiris and Isis, Set, the god Set, kills Osiris and cuts him into 14 pieces. And then Isis goes around and gets all 13 pieces, except for the 14th piece is his phallus, which has been eaten by a fish. And so she replaces it with a stone phallus. This is why you see obelisks all over Egypt. So then she resurrects Osiris, but he has a stone phallus now instead of his normal one, which has been eaten by a fish. So I saw a scholar recently claim, and I'm going to try and have him on the show. He's this professor. I can't remember his name, Professor David something or other. He contends, and it's very compelling to me, that Yahweh is definitely not a good god. And it's like, in fact, he thinks that one of the closest comps for it is the Egyptian god Set, because there's all this iconography of donkeys, and also Set was the god of plagues and the desert and donkeys, and also a god of death. And so like the whole killing of all the firstborn sons in Egypt, except those that had the blood over the mantle, and
right, yes,
the 10 deadly plagues, that this, from the Egyptian point of view, were the actions of only one god, and that god was Set, which is basically Satan, right?
Yes.
Pretty much the same. And seems to me is probably Moloch, the lower aspect of Saturn. All that stuff, diseases, plagues, killing of infants, right? This god also later, like, some kids laugh at a guy being bald, and that god summons a couple of she-bears to eat the kids in retribution for laughing that the guy's bald, but he's a true believer or whatever. Right? That sounds like the kind of thing that, like, a witch might do to curse someone who made fun of her nose or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not a noble action. And there's tons of stuff like that. And so it's interesting to consider Set. Then I started to wonder about all the obelisks that are in, like, the city of London on the Thames, or in New York in Central Park, or in the Vatican. They're all actually Egyptian originals. Now consider, if you maybe worship this god Set, might you want to take the stone phalluses from Egypt where they represent Osiris, and then it could become a mockery as part of your inversion, that you've actually stolen these representations of the phallus, which would be here in this image, the white phallus of Osiris, versus then it goes to the darkened black, like the mockery of having them in, DC. And the only one that's modern is the Washington Monument, which I don't actually get a super bad feeling from that one, the way I do from the ones that have been moved to Central Park and so forth. I've seen the one at Central Park with my own eyes, and it's odd because it's on the back of crabs, and I can't help but think of Cancer and wonder, like, why would they have chose Cancer as the constellation that they would refer to here? I'm not entirely certain. I think Cancer is when it's like moved out of, by that point, the age of Leo, which is when Atlantis would have fallen at the end of the age of Leo. That's why the Sphinx faced to where the constellation Leo would have risen during the vernal equinox back in when it would have been, 9,000 years before the time of Solon, like Plato said, when the sinking of Atlantis beneath the waves happened. The Sphinx looks directly at that where the constellation of Leo would have risen, that exact point at that exact point in time. So I wonder here if this isn't mocking Osiris, which is much more of a messianic god, a god who resurrects, no less, right? That sounds kind of familiar, right? A good god that resurrects versus this evil god that has stolen his phallus, right? So it's just interesting. I mean, I wonder about the symbolism for the obelisk to go dark like that is just so interesting.
Yeah, I wish I'd paid closer attention to what actually
Happened.
conversation she is eavesdropping on at this point, because it might have been relevant. The visuals caught me, but
Yeah, maybe check that out again. I just like, even when I look at this still or almost any of the stills from the movie, the energy from it is so dark and thick. It's just
yeah,
that's why I
yeah,
have no desire whatsoever to watch this movie. I just feel
right.
like it's very heavy.
It is.
I mean, thank you for watching it. So
I
that,
watched the damn thing twice after you told me we were going to talk about it. I was
oh
like,
man, well, I did not put them up to that, folks. Yeah, that was,
no, 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 no. I wanted, to like at least be able to speak somewhat knowledgeably. The one thing I'll say, like, the feeling that I got in the final minutes of this film uh, are very similar to feelings that I've gotten to like two other movies that both took place in like the past 5 years that I'd never felt for any piece of TV or film before ever, which I thought was like really weird. And that feeling was like grim despair. Like, that this is going to be ending soon. This movie's going to be ending soon, and it's not going to be resolved. Like, you're not going to even get any answers. You don't find out who's attacking America. You don't even find out what's exactly going on. Is it an EMP? Is it, like, have nukes been going off? Is it, did somebody shut down the grid? Like, you don't know. And it leaves you feeling very hollow and dead inside. And the two other pieces of entertainment that did that, one of them was David Lynch's Twin Peaks comeback, where like it's great overall, but like in the last episode, like there's like 10 minutes left, and things are just getting more complex and confusing and dark, and you realize like, oh my God, like we're trapped here. Like this is going to be bad. Like we're not going to get a happy ending. We're not going to get resolution. Like we're not even going to find out what's really been going on, So it's been this long, huge, entertaining journey, and at the end, you don't get the answers, and you left feeling hollow. And the other time was that last James Bond movie, which No Time to Die. And
is that the one that had nanobots in it or something?
yes, it did. It did. And he dies at the end. It's like that's unfathomable that like James Bond would die in a James Bond movie. And like that movie ends where, it's coming to an end. He's been shot, he's bleeding out, and like there's these missiles coming to the island that he's on. It's going to blow the whole place up. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is not any ending that I would ever want. And I just left me feeling hollow and dead inside. And this movie did the same thing.
It's funny because there's a movie that I can, especially from a cult perspective, it's like, I kind of wish I hadn't watched it now, called The Empty Man. Have you seen it?
No, but that
Oh my
sounds
God.
about right. Yeah.
It's to me, it's like kind of the central goal of what the evil ones kind of want to do. It's basically it starts out and there's these climbers and they and maybe you should watch it. We could do a decode of it because I've already suffered through it. I don't need to watch it again. But it's just the entire movie is insanely occult. And there's these climbers. It starts out, and by far the creepiest part is the beginning of the movie. There's these climbers, and they're like up in the Himalayas someplace, and one of them falls down into like a crevasse and into a cave. And there in that cave is this insane, horrifying looking, like, I think, four-armed giant. that's like mummified, that's sitting there like meditating, and it just radiates evil. And this guy is sitting in front of him, and he's like, "Oh my God." And the other guy comes down to like try and rescue him, and the other guy's like, "Don't touch me, don't touch me. Whatever you do, don't touch me, don't touch me." And he, of course, touches him, right? Because you can't really have the movie proceed if he would have just used common sense. And when a guy is freaking stuck frozen in front of a four-armed, like, nightmare mummy thing, you don't touch them. If they tell you, whatever you do, don't touch me,
Right.
listen to the words coming out of their mouth, right? Like,
Right.
if I was in that situation, I'm not sure what I would do, but I would certainly not touch the guy. And so there's this weird mind virus that comes out of this thing, basically. And it turns this guy into this thing called the Empty Man. And he vibrates at a certain frequency, they say. And like throughout this movie, there's all this like cult, and I don't want to ruin it for you because it's actually quite a mind-bending movie. But there's a scene in it where this evil cult, because I that's not spoiling too much. There's this horrible evil cult in it, just unfathomably evil, and they just like really like they're not like evil like they just want to like kind of wipe everything out. They just kind of want to erase everything is their goal. They're like the ultra nihilists is the best way to describe them.
Annihilation. The annihilation of all.
But spiritual annihilation. They
Right.
want to
Yes.
spiritually and mentally annihilate all humans on Earth. That's like it's like this insane annihilation cult, which is very Molochian. Annihilation is like a big part of what it's about. And so they show the car of this evil cult at one point, and it has these environmental things like reduce your carbon footprint and stuff like that, stickers on either side of it. And so it was just like a brief flash, but it was actually almost the most disturbing part of the movie because they actually literally had an article in the Daily Mail very recently that said scientists now say breathing contributes
Yes.
to global warming. It's a fucking for real headline.
Yeah.
I just can't believe it. And it just is like, if you've ever seen that meme that has Bugs Bunny and his like gunfighter thing, and he goes, well, the carbon they want to reduce is you.
That's right. Yep.
And that's what it's about. And so this it's just the entire.
Well, let me just say while you're on that, like a carbon footprint. Like what leaves a footprint besides a person? Right. We want to get rid of the carbon footprint. I mean, that's humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
Except for not them because they're exempted. Their yachts.
Right. Yes.
Their private jets are exempted, and they're flying to these conferences in private jets, and they're buying oceanfront property like the Obamas to bring it back full. Yeah.
Yes.
So, gosh, I'm just trying to think. Oh, the most intriguing thing for me in that movie, was the Tesla self-driving thing clogging the highways for two reasons. One, Musk had an odd tweet where he said something effective. Well, the nice thing about Teslas is that you can charge them during even a Mad Max apocalypse. If you have a solar power thing, you'd still be able to charge your car, and you might not be able to get gas. And that was his response to that scene. It's just very odd. And you and I were debating before the show, like, did he have to sign off on that? Right?
Yeah, that was a great question you asked. Like all Tesla features in this film a lot, and not in a good way.
Right.
And I would, I would guess they would have to get.
They know now at this point they've figured out, and they don't like. He's clearly protected by the families who run everything. Clearly, one of these powerful families is protecting Musk and is using him as a front man. He's a made man in the mafia sense, and he's untouchable. Clearly. Or else I think they would off him. But they know now that this guy, that Musk represents this other faction, the same way they know that Trump represents this other faction. They haven't quite fully discerned because they just don't understand, I don't think, that this other faction is much, 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 much more organized than they think it is, and much, much, much more powerful. Because it seems to lose all the time, but by losing, it wins in part because it reveals the methods of the enemy. So I wonder if Musk signed off on this to let it happen. What's very curious to me is right after this film came out, Tesla did a mass recall based on the autopilot function.
Yes.
What the fuck is that? So then it makes
that was weird. That was weird.
Guys, were there bad guys in Tesla who installed this, or maybe Musk went along with it initially? He said, yeah, okay, we'll go along with it and we'll let you put that in, as the Luciferians were doing left, right, and center until very recently. They were going along with the Molochians' plans. Heck, usually they were the ones who were spearheading the plans and creating them in the first place and adding the complexity. We were talking about before the show that, in my estimation, Hollywood is definitely Molochian dominated, and nowadays it's only Molochian, but it used to be that the Molochians were the producers and the creatives were all Luciferian. And I'm talking about in terms of consciousness. I'm not suggesting that all these people worship, although certainly in Hollywood, there's no question that there's a large contingent of people who worship worship Moloch. That should be obvious. The Hollywood pedophilia, rumors isn't a strong enough word. Reality.
Yeah, I think
rampant. Yeah.
Hollywood is a town of magicians. It is a town of magicians, and most of them now, I don't know if it was always this way, now they're dark magicians. I don't know if they always were dark magicians, but they sure are now.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Hollywood itself, like they would cut they would cut a wand from Holly, the Druids, and there's definitely like weird, like dark druidry is part of the whole milieu. I mean, they would cut the mistletoe with a sickle. Hey, we're coming up on Christmas, mistletoe, right? They would cut it with a golden sickle, and that was representing Saturn. But the good druids, and there were good druids, I believe, were worshiping the higher octave of Saturn. But there's the dark druidic force that would come out during moon type things, where with a silver sickle then would be more representative there. So gosh, I had a thread there that I wanted to pull. Magicians in Hollywood, yeah. So it used to
Dude, that could be a whole episode. That could be a whole separate episode.
We could, but just real quick and just to sketch it out. The Luciferians used to be the creatives. And again, when I say this here, I mean it in the sense of consciousness. Some amount of them may very well worship Lucifer. Surely Musk does. I'm certain that he does. I mean, Grimes has admitted she channeled Lucifer for her music. So that to me is like, I don't think it's a huge reach at this point to say that the longtime girlfriend of Musk who had a bunch of children, if she is saying that openly, Musk must at least be open to that. He wore that crazy
Halloween costume.
His mother is certainly like deep into the cult. Okay, have you heard? This is the craziest thing. I'm definitely doing a show about this. I actually, like, this has a ring of truth to me. Elon Musk may well be Werner von Braun's son.
I saw that in a tweet today too. I don't know. I mean,
it makes a lot of sense to me because Werner von Braun wrote a book in which the ruler of Mars, when they go to Mars in this, it's the only book Werner von Braun wrote that was a fiction, right? Everything else is about rocketry and stuff like that. He wrote a number of books, but most of them are scientific. About his time at NASA, blah, blah, whatever. But he wrote a book in where they go to Mars, and the leader of Mars is named Elon. What are the fucking odds of that? I've never heard the name Elon in my life other than Musk. I know there's maybe 30 people, or now there's probably many, but over 15 years of age, there's almost nobody named Elon on this planet, I would contend. So for the number one person who has the means and is trying to go to Mars, happening to be named Elon Musk, or happening to be named Elon, is just, that's like a little bit too big of a coincidence for me to believe, right? That's like the whole, in the last episode where we talked about the Titanic and the Titan. Yeah. It's just hard for me to believe that he frickin' writes that book in the 60s. Musk is born in 71. He dies then in like 78, Werner von Braun. I mean, he was still alive. I don't know. I think it has some legs. They do kind of look similar. It's certainly fascinating.
Do they look similar? I didn't get around to checking the similarities.
You got to look at Werner von Braun when he's younger, of course, and then
in his Nazi regalia.
Well, maybe not quite that young.
Okay,
when he was like with Kennedy,
right, and Walt Disney. Well, the only thing I'll say on top of that is, if that were true, it would also explain why the person we're told is Musk's dad would not have a good relationship with Elon Musk, which we know they do not. And even Musk has said his father was pretty terrible. So, I mean, look, as I said in our last conversation, I don't put anything past anybody anymore, really. I mean, um, these bloodlines swap out kids and just all sorts of stuff. I mean, again, it's like down the rabbit hole you go.
There's a lot of rumors about the Obamas, and I've seen pictures of some friends of the Obamas to where they look a lot more like the two daughters who
Oh,
don't
yeah.
look that similar.
Yeah.
That one looks also to me like it has some legs, as a
Yeah.
possibility. Curious, very, very odd. Well, anyways, Tom, did you have any last thoughts on
Well, I
leave?
mean, just yeah, like while we're talking about the Obamas, I just think like everything is so strange
Hmm.
in the world nowadays that people might not really comprehend like how strange it is that a former president of the United States would make this kind of movie. That I mean, it's basically a snuff film about America.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
and it's like the dude was the president. Like this is about the end of America, and he put his name on this. He's proud of it. Again, we mentioned beforehand, I was never a fan of George Bush, but it was like at least the stuff that he did when he got out of the White House, he was like, oh, like his patriotism about 9/11 and pro-America. And even if it was marketing, which of course it was, he wasn't making anything about the death of America. So like that's really weird. And people should focus on that because it's blasphemous.
Yeah, it's very, very creepy. And I mean, in my opinion, like the Obama administration is probably the worst in the entire history of the US, with only Woodrow Wilson as close. And that's because he created basically the precursor to the UN with the League of Nations, and he helped the Federal Reserve and the income tax get passed. And the what is it, 14th Amendment or whatever, to where that which never really passed correctly, that allows them to do income tax. Right, that never really cleared all the hurdles. It got close, but it didn't actually. That amendment never really passed correctly. It's like
And
the
he ruined race relations, I mean, which were much improved under Teddy Roosevelt, who invited like a black man to the White House, I think for the first time.
wow,
Um, and Woodrow Wilson had a screening of Birth of the Nation in the White House
oh
and
wow,
like said like this is a movie everyone in America needs to see. History written with lightning. That was what Woodrow Wilson said about Birth of a Nation. And the
wow,
Ku Klux Klan, which had been in decline under Roosevelt, under Wilson, like boom, skyrocketed.
wow. That's so interesting because do you know what other film that Woodrow Wilson had there at the White House, which was the first one on the White House lawn ever?
What?
Calibria, which is about Moloch worship. Straight up.
Really?
Yeah, it's a
Wow.
silent film, and some people even think that there's an actual killing in it, in the scene where they sacrifice to the statue of Moloch. Some people contend that the kid that they put into the mouth of Moloch literally died there. I don't know if that's true, but they certainly show this giant statue of Moloch, and they open the mouth and they put a kid in the mouth and close the mouth, and out comes all the steam and smoke and stuff. And
Oh my
it's
God.
in a temple of Moloch in Carthage. And
What's the name of that movie? I gotta dig into this.
Caliberia. It's a silent.
Caliberia.
Yeah, I'll send you the. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we can talk about it offline too. It's
yeah,
like,
for
holy
sure.
cats. Yeah,
Yeah,
so Woodrow Wilson was evil as hell. I mean, no
Cabiria.
pun
My
intended.
apologies. It's Cabiria. I thought there was an L in there, huh?
Cabiria. Okay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I'll send it to you here in the chat. But yeah, so yeah, Woodrow Wilson, he the Federal Reserve, I mean, like, my God, like he's probably the worst. Got us involved in World War One, the IRS, the Federal Reserve, like ruined race relations. I didn't even know that. I knew about the Birth of the Nation. I didn't realize that things have been improving prior to him. And of course, they shot Teddy Roosevelt, who was much more of a Luciferian, in my opinion. He was just much more libertarian in general, and broke up the trusts and so forth. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's good; he's flawed, but better.
No,
So
I mean, he was kind of a racist himself too, some, but I mean, again, it was like the times. I mean, for
also
a
19.
man for his times, he
Yeah,
was ahead of his times. He was
exactly.
trying at least,
Yeah, that's what you got to look at always. Is you got to contextualize people. But so yeah, Obama though, I think has a very like strong claim to number two, if not number one in some ways, especially if you consider. Did you ever see that creepy interview? And then we should close this down. Did you ever see that creepy interview with Obama where he said he'd like to have a third term?
Yes.
He would
Yeah.
just talk in earpiece. Like
I don't see it. Yeah.
revelation of the method stuff there.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine
I mean,
if Trump had said that? The media would never have stopped talking about it forever.
yeah. Yeah. It's so clearly that's what's going on. You know, I mean, maybe Obama and Susan Rice and a couple other people are in a small triumvirate, you know, controlling the puppet Biden. But I mean, clearly somebody's running it behind the scenes, and the continuing attempts to divide people by race, which was a hallmark of the Obama administration, has been, you know, jacked up right again under Biden. You
Absolutely.
know, I mean, you know, and again, you want to talk about a great law of inversion black magic spell, and this isn't me. I've got a black friend in Savannah who said this to me years and years ago. Years and years ago. You know, she said to me, it was like America elected its first black president, who then spent 8 years telling the country what a racist nation we are. You know, I mean, if that's not an inversion of the of reality, you know.
Yeah, it's wild. So, all right. Well, I think that that is a pretty good place to tie things off. Other than that, I will say that fortunately, these, you know, this is a time of year to where we're moving closer and closer to the solstice, and that's part of the reason I think they released this just now. And like I said, even the stills have a dark, heavy energy, and even this discussion has a dark, heavy energy. Remember, though, after the solstice, for 3 days, the sun basically stays the same, but then it starts moving again on the 25th. That's why Christmas is on that day. I'm of the personal opinion that Jesus was probably born a Pisces, based on certain things that they describe as far as like with the wise men coming. There's certain passages that kind of point towards springtime. So it's interesting to me that you know, I believe in the historical Jesus, but I think certain elements have been manipulated, and among them is Christmas. But the nice thing about Christmas is that it's the motion when it's when the sun regains motion after being crucified for 3 days, and it starts getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And that means that the dark ones, they lose power as the light comes back and starts increasing. And so there's one more really bad year probably, which will be 2024, especially next fall and winter. But you know, light is around the corner both in this year and in the term of the next few years. I do think things are going to get a lot crazier, and unfortunately, I don't think it'll be long term, but something along the lines of what they're saying in this movie. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. This is revelation of the method. So there's a plan that they plan to do some kind of hardcore thing, an EMP or shutting down the internet, right? The WEF has talked an awful lot about that, which would explain like a lot of that. They actually were just talking about hackers recently, Chinese hackers getting
Yes. That story broke the day after this movie came out.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Wow. So then that looks like laying a narrative groundwork, you know. And so there will be more chaos, but remember the light is going to be returning both here in the short term, and that's going to help people's moods a lot because they won't be able to do this. And I feel as an energetic that there's kind of an oppressive heavy cloud right now. I think that that's going to change at the beginning of the year.
Well, they're in overdrive. They are in overdrive.
Chaos.
You know,
massive chaos this coming.
Yeah. So there was one note that I had here at the end. Just I wanted to point out this was originally came from a book, and it was by a Bangladeshian. I don't know how you pronounce that, or would say first generation. The parents immigrated here. He was born here. I'm not going to give this whole backstory. This book, well, the one thing I want to say is this book was sold to be a movie before it was even published. The rights to make this into a movie were purchased by Netflix in July of 2020, and the book wasn't even published until October 2020. So this film, and to get this message out, has been in the works like for 3 years. Like this whole thing has been systematically planned to get this movie out. Like it was such a hot property and such an important piece of propaganda that they had the wheels turning on this before you could even buy it as a book. 3 months before you could buy it as a book.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, these people.
Well, they super get in my nerves too, and I'm worried that they're going to go to very similar playbook. Speaking of 2020, I think they might try and roll out the exact same thing, because just like Hollywood keeps churning out retreads, a lot of the psyops are just like getting
Yeah.
sloppy, and they're churned out retreads because, again, that consciousness level of the Luciferians have withdrawn their support from the Molochians, and to a certain extent, they're just feeding them rope. Like, get out there, Klaus. Talk about how you're gonna eat the bugs. Oh yeah,
Right.
I like it when I talk about eating the bugs. Oh yeah, they're pushing these Molochians out there to just say what they've always wanted to say, how much they hate us, like that still of Julia Roberts.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
fucking hate people.
Yeah. And they are just openly saying it now. Whereas in the past, they would have had handlers that go, no, 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 you can't say that in public, Klaus. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
maybe forcing them to eat bugs. We know that's your kink behind closed doors. But you can't talk about that in public, Klaus. It sounds a little unhinged, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's weird. Like, is it intentional, or is it that like they just can't control themselves and like evil wants to show like the girl who got cast as Snow White saying how much she hated Snow White. I mean, like, what the hell? I mean, it's just bizarre. It's just so bizarre.
Well, I mean, that's another thing that's happened, is that whatever glamour magic that Hollywood used to have has been withdrawn and collapsed.
Yes,
Have
completely.
that glamour anymore. It used to. I remember even I was, 15 years ago. I still kind of thought Hollywood was bad and whatever, and I knew there was definitely like pedophilia was rampant in parts of it. I still was kind of like, oh, movie stars, like they're kind of cool. And now I'm just like, I look at movie stars and I'm always like, even if they're a movie star I like, I'm like, oh God, I don't want to consider if they're bad, right? But I
Right.
just kind
Right.
of assume they are, and I
Right.
don't like them, and so many of them have skeezy vibes. Like I used to love DiCaprio. And I can't stand him now. I loathe him. And it's like I can just see him now. And I used to not be able to actually see him. I saw this glamour magic. It's not there anymore. So yeah, like I just think the mask has fallen off because their magic has been broken, because their time's coming to an end.
Yeah. I mean, I do believe that. Yeah. I mean, I think we come out on the other side of this thing victorious, good wins. I really do. I just don't know how long it's gonna, or how ugly it's gonna have to get, you know.
Yeah.
That's so
Well,
whatever. But I appreciate the opportunity to explain this to people. Thank you.
yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Tom. And thanks for watching. If you got this far, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. And all of Tom's information, so you can check out his superb writing, will be found down below. All right. Catch you guys next time.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.